Good evening. Today is June 24th, 2023. And in India, it's June 25th, 2023. So you might ask, what is significant about that date? 40 years ago, Indian cricketing team registered probably one of the greatest upset ever recorded in a World Cup match against the mighty West Indies. I would say the mighty and juggernaut West Indies, which was demolishing every team that was in its way. West Indies had already won the 1975 World Cup and the 1979 World Cup. So the chances of a three-peat were quite high. Even though there were a lot of other good teams like England, Australia, which were out there, West Indies was clearly the favorite. The West Indies were led by Clive Lloyd and had the likes of Vivian Richards, Gordon Greenidge and Haynes, and the fearsome pace quartet of Michael Holding, Andy Roberts, Marshall, and Garner. So for India to pull off what would probably be one of the greatest upsets ever recorded, and it would almost mirror what, from an American point of view, it's the miracle on ice against the mighty Soviet Union. So in this case, while there was no real rivalry that was on stage, what India did 40 years ago was probably one of the greatest victories, not just in the Indian cricketing annals, but also in the world cricket history. And at that time, India's chances were pretty bleak. India was led by a captain, Kapil Dev, and everything you hear about him, the belief he had, the confidence he had, and they played like a team, and they played like champions. So prior to the 1983 World Cup, India won only one match in 1975 against East Africa, a country that does not exist anymore. India lost all the three matches in the 1979 edition of the World Cup. And one of the losses happened to be against Sri Lanka, which was not even a test-playing nation at the time. The bar was so low that the average Indian fan, or even a die-hard Indian fan, they thought that the India's chances for the World Cup 1983 were quite bleak. India was slotted in Group B with the West Indies, Australia, and Zimbabwe. And talk about starting on a wrong foot. Prior to the matches, Indian team lost to minor counties by 19 runs in embarrassing fashion. So there was no telecast of the match, and thankfully no one got to see that. But one of the things about this team, what it did 40 years ago, the seeds of the victory was planted in game number one itself. In the first match against the mighty West Indies, India shocked the West Indian team by 34 runs after almost a miraculous comeback by the West Indies tailenders. The late Yashpal Sharma scored a brilliant 89, and Yashpal was I would say, the cornerstone and the centerpiece of the Indian batting lineup during that World Cup. And Roger Binney and Ravi Shastri came in with 3 wickets each. That was the first loss for the West Indian team in the World Cup. That is how much they really dominated the sport over the past, since 1975, almost like 8 years. Now, that loss to the minor countries seemed like a distant memory. India followed up the shocker with an easy victory over Zimbabwe, and they were on top of the group. The cricket crazy nation now started to pay attention to the exploits. And as a 15-year-old growing up, the only way we got to even hear about the Indian cricket team was through radio. That was the only channel we heard the cricket commentary. Only the major metros had access to television. Again, the next 2 matches, India, faced, I think they lost to Australia and then to West Indies, and they were tied with 2-2. And with 2 matches to go, India needed to win to qualify for semifinals. Now came probably one of the greatest, I would say, batting displays ever recorded by any Indian batsman I would say by any world batsman. The only other thing that comes to my mind is Vivian Richards 189. But when India faced Zimbabwe, they were tottering at 9 for 4. Actually, it was 17 for 5. And the top 5 batsmen, their scores read like a zip code 00519. The Haryana Hurricane, as Kapil Dev was called, he started to build the innings with the assistance of lower order players like Binny and Madan Lal. Once he settled down, he went on a rampage and he just took charge of the match and he shredded the Zimbabwe bowling attack. He blasted 16 fours and 6 sixers on the way to record-breaking 175 not out. For the 9th wicket of 126, wicketkeeper Kirmani contributed 24 runs but stood like a rock for his captain. What was really unfortunate about this game was it never got to be televised. The BBC was on strike and India went on to win by 31 runs, and Kapil Dev single-handedly pulled India out of doldrums to probably win this match for India on his shoulders. Madan Lal and Binny contributed with the ball, but the foundation of the greatest comeback ever recorded in a World Cup was set by probably the greatest all-rounders ever to play for India. To this date, we're still searching for one. Wisden Sports actually called it a remarkable match which contained one of the spectacular innings played in any form of cricket. With the confidence on their side, India went on to demolish Australia by 118 runs, and then India had made the semi-finals. All of India was right now, had so much hopes for this Indian cricket team. The magical run was a great story. The newspapers were covering it as well. And India was actually going to play the host nation, England, in the semi-finals. It was not an easy match for India. The English team was still predicted to win that match, but Indian bowlers did an amazing job of restricting England to 213 runs, and excellent bowling by Kapil Dev, Mohinder Amarnath and Binny. India's batting lineup started in a very tentative fashion, and then Yashpal Sharma and Amarnath and Patil put India back on the winning track. And I still remember, like it was yesterday, the way the English team deployed their fielding. They had all the players on one side of the pitch to escape the crowd invasion. But anyway, having said that, India easily cruised to a win in the semifinals and went on to cement their place in the final. And of course, who else would be in the final? They had to face the mighty West Indies again. Now I'm going to actually pause here because one of the things that there was a movie that came out 83, Ranveer Singh played the role of Kapil Dev, and the reason why I wanted to bring that was the innings that Kapil Dev played against Zimbabwe. We almost had to live that for the first time watching it on television due to the BBC strike, like I mentioned. So it was incredible. The movie did great justice to the happenings of that in 1983. Going back to the final, in those days the final was played for 60 overs, and India started to bat, but I would say I don't think anybody in the right mind picked India to win, even though India had beaten the West Indies in the group level match, and the West Indies had come back and beaten India in the second game. So in the final, it seemed that the West Indies was going to win it quite easily, and the Indian batting, except for Shrikant, he did a great job of blasting 7 fours and a 6 for his 38. And who thought that would be the highest score ever recorded in the final? West Indies managed to bundle out India to a paltry 183. And as I mentioned, it was only about 3 point few runs and over for them to be crowned as champions. Now, one of the classic balls ever bowled in World Cup by Balwinder Sandhu, Castle Gordon Greenwich. To this day, I would think it's probably one of the greatest balls he had ever bowled. And then um, India had to face now Vivian Richards right now. And Vivian Richards seemed like he was in a hurry. He was almost trying to finish the match by himself. And like the previous game, he trashed all the Indian bowlers all around the ground. It seemed that it would just be a matter of time that the West Indies would be crowned as champions. But Madan Lal convinced his captain to bowl one more over, and that would be the turning point of the match. A short ball from Madan Lal, and Vivian Richards pulled over, and Kapil Dev probably ran towards the boundary for almost 30 yards, waved off Yashpal Sharma, and pulled off a miraculous catch over his shoulders to end the innings. The great Viv's innings came to an end. And then the West Indian team collapsed like cards when Amarnath and Madan Lal used the conditions admirably, very slow bowling, medium pace. And it soon seemed that the dream for India would come alive. And when Amarnath trapped holding LBW with the West Indies score at 140, India had created history by defeating the West Indies. To this day, that remains the lowest total ever defended in a World Cup. The dream of one person, Kapil Dev, became a reality. The David had defeated the Goliath in an improbable fashion, and the Indians were out there celebrating their team's victory, not just in England, but also in the country. I think this win changed the course of Indian cricket. And to this day, I would rate that game as probably the one that put India on the map. And after that, the Indian cricket team continued to register big wins, one coming in 1985 in Benson Hedges in Australia. But the foundation of any future wins or any future success for India actually started, the seeds were planted in that 1983 World Cup. I would cherish it for the rest of my life. Not just me, anyone who was alive 40 years ago, to see one of the most improbable comebacks in the history of cricket would cherish that game forever in their minds. Kapil finished in the top 6 run getters and scored the highest number of catches in that World Cup, where Yashpal Sharma and Amarnath made significant contributions. Bini and Madan Lal were the top 2 wicket takers, and Syed Kirmani finished second by a dismissal. This was indeed a great show of grit and determination by a team that refused to lose. Kapil Dev and his band of brothers, as we call them, Kapil Devils, pulled out what would be the greatest win in Indian cricketing history. The movie that came out 2 years ago brought back a lot of memories. The movie captured the purity of those incredible moments in vivid detail and stayed so true to the real events. The movie took me down the memory lane because most of what we watched in the movie, we had to hear it in the radio. So this was indeed an incredible, 40 years have happened, and I can remember each and every wicket, each and every run that was scored in that World Cup final. And I believe Shrikant in his YouTube channel mentioned that they were all getting together to celebrate this momentous occasion. The dream of one captain, the belief of one captain, the team that played like champions brought home the trophy to almost 800 million Indian people yearning for their first victory. So with that, I would like to end this podcast, and incredible journey for India, incredible journey for world of cricket, and thank you so much for listening.